The space station Haven's Rest floated silently in the middle of a purple and gold nebula. The massive structure looked like a metal flower with 12 petals, each section designed to house different alien species with their own special needs. Some needed water, others needed different air, and a few needed pure energy to survive. Katie Morrison pressed her face against the thick glass window of the human section. She had never seen anything so beautiful in her 24 years of life. The colors of the nebula swirled and danced like paint mixing in water. Back on Earth, she had only seen pictures of space. Now she was living in it. "Stop staring and focus," said Ambassador Frank Rodriguez from behind her. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. Frank had been doing this job for 15 years, and it showed in the way he always looked worried. Katie turned around and smoothed down her blue diplomatic uniform. The fabric felt strange against her skin. She was more used to military clothes, but those days were supposed to be behind her now. "Sorry, sir, it's just amazing out there." "Amazing won't help us in the meeting room," Frank said. He was reading from a tablet, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. "Remember, we're the new kids here. Most of these species have been traveling between stars for thousands of years. They think we're babies who just learned to walk." Katie nodded. She had read all the files on the flight here. Earth had only invented faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Compared to the other species in the Galactic Confederation, humans were newcomers. Some of the aliens had been building spaceships since before humans discovered fire. The meeting room was enormous. A circular table sat in the center, with 12 different types of chairs arranged around it. Each chair was designed for a different species. The human chairs looked almost normal compared to the others. There was a tank of water for the fish-like Deepwater Alliance, a platform that glowed with energy for the Luminari, and something that looked like a crystal tree for the Zephyr IANS. Katie took her seat next to Frank. Her chair was comfortable, but she felt small in the huge room. The ceiling was so high she could barely see it, and the walls were covered with symbols from all the different species. "Here they come," Frank whispered. The first to enter were the Zephyrians. They looked like walking crystals, their bodies made of clear stone that caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. Their leader, Ambassador Veltar, was 7 feet tall and moved with a sound like wind chimes. When she spoke, her voice was musical but cold. "Greetings to all gathered here," Veltar said, her words coming from a translator device. "May this meeting bring understanding to those wise enough to seek it." Katie noticed how Veltar's eyes passed over the human section without stopping. It was like they weren't even there. Next came the Thrax Collective. Commander Zix looked like a giant praying mantis made of black metal. His arms ended in sharp blades, and his compound eyes reflected the room's lights like mirrors. When he walked, his feet made clicking sounds on the metal floor. Other Thrax followed behind him, all looking like living weapons, the Deepwater Alliance. Representatives swam into their section through tubes filled with blue-green water. They looked like dolphins with arms and legs, their skin smooth and silver. They spoke in whistles and clicks that their translators turned into words. The Luminari didn't walk in at all. They appeared as balls of pure light floating above their energy platforms. Their voices sounded like electricity when they spoke, crackling and buzzing through the translator. 8 more species entered, each stranger than the last. There were beings that looked like walking trees, others that seemed to be made of living metal, and some that Katie couldn't even figure out how to describe. The room filled with different sounds, smells, and types of light. Finally, everyone was seated. The lights dimmed, and a hologram appeared in the center of the table. It showed a map of the galaxy with red dots marking places where fighting was happening. There were hundreds of red dots. "We have gathered here because our wars have gone on too long," said Elder Finn of the Deepwater Alliance. His voice was smooth and sad. "For 300 years, our species have fought over planets, resources, and old grudges. Millions have died. Entire worlds have been destroyed." Katie looked at the map. She had studied it before coming here, but seeing it like this made her stomach feel tight. So much fighting, so much death. The question before us, continued Elder Finn, is whether we can find a way to live in peace, or whether we will fight until there is nothing left to fight over. Ambassador Veltar's crystal body flashed with light. Peace is a noble goal, but it requires wisdom. Some species understand the weight of such decisions, others— She looked directly at the human section. Others are too young to comprehend the complexity of galactic politics. Katie felt her face get hot. Frank put a hand on her arm, warning her to stay quiet. The Zephyrians have been part of galactic society for 12,000 years, Veltar continued. We have seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. We understand that peace cannot be achieved through naive hope alone. Commander Zix's mandibles clicked together. The Thrax agree. War is the natural state of intelligent species. We fight because we must. Those who have never truly faced death in battle cannot understand the realities we face. Several other species nodded in agreement. Katie could see Frank's jaw tighten. He was trying very hard not to say anything. Perhaps, said Ambassador Veltar, the newer species should observe and learn before attempting to contribute to such serious matters. There's much wisdom to be gained from simply watching and listening. The insult was clear. Katie's hands clenched into fists under the table. She had not come all this way to be treated like a child. The humans mean well, added Commander Zix. But meaning well and understanding reality are very different things. We have been fighting these wars since before their species knew that other worlds existed. Frank leaned forward. The human delegation is here because Earth has successfully resolved several major conflicts in our region of space. We have experience. That might be valuable to this discussion. Small conflicts between primitive species, Veltar said dismissively. Hardly comparable to galactic warfare. Katie bit her tongue so hard she tasted blood. These aliens had no idea what they were talking about. The outer colony wars had been anything but small. Entire solar systems had been turned into battlefields. Millions of people had died, but she stayed quiet. This was Frank's show, and she was just supposed to observe and learn. That's what they had told her back on Earth. Don't make waves, don't cause problems. Just watch and take notes. The meeting continued for hours. Each species presented their grievances against the others. The Zephyrians accused the Thrax of attacking their mining stations. The Thrax blamed the Luminari for destroying their colony ships. The Luminari said the Deepwater Alliance was polluting shared space with their chemical trails. It went on and on. Katie took notes, but mostly she watched. She saw how each species talked about war like it was weather, something that just happened, and had to be endured. They spoke of acceptable losses and strategic advantages. They discussed territory and resources like they were playing a board game. None of them talked about ending the fighting. They only talked about managing it, controlling it, making it less costly. They had been at war for so long that they couldn't imagine what peace would actually look like. Katie thought about the files she had read. 300 years of fighting. Entire generations had lived and died knowing nothing but war. Children grew up on battlefields. Families were scattered across star systems. Whole planets had been abandoned because they were too dangerous to live on. As the day wore on, Katie began to understand something that made her feel cold inside. These species didn't really want peace. They wanted to win. But they had been fighting for so long that none of them remembered what winning was supposed to look like. The meeting ended with nothing decided. Each species would return to their sections to discuss what they had heard. Tomorrow, they would meet again and try to find common ground. As the aliens filed out, Katie heard them talking among themselves. They spoke in whispers, but their translators were still working. The humans are so young, one said. Innocent, said another. They have no idea what real war looks like. Katie smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. If only they knew. 3 days had passed since the first meeting, and Katie could feel the tension growing thicker in the air. The space station Haven's Rest felt smaller now, like the walls were closing in. Every species blamed every other species for something. Trust was impossible when everyone thought their neighbors were trying to kill them. Katie walked through the common areas, watching the different aliens interact. The Zephyrians stayed in groups, their crystal bodies chiming softly when they moved together. The Thrax kept to themselves, always checking their weapons and armor. The fish-like Deepwater Alliance members swam nervously in their tubes, rarely coming out to talk with others. She had counted at least 15 different arguments in the past 3 days. Small fights over who could use which facilities, who had the right to speak first in meetings, even who could look at whom without it being considered an insult. These species had been fighting for so long that they saw enemies everywhere. The morning meeting had been the worst yet. Commander Zix had accused the Luminari of attacking Thrax supply ships with energy weapons. The Luminari claimed they were only defending themselves from Thrax boarding parties. Elder Finn of the Deepwater Alliance said both species were polluting the water worlds his people needed to survive on. You destroy everything you touch. Elder Finn had shouted, his dolphin-like voice high and angry through the translator. First you fight over our worlds, then you make them impossible to live on. Your people attack our mining operations? Commander Zix had replied, his blade arms clicking together. We only take what we need to survive. Survival, Ambassador. Veltar had said, her crystal body flashing with cold light. Always it comes down to survival. None of you understand the bigger picture. Katie had watched it all from her seat next to Frank, taking notes and trying not to scream. These aliens acted like children fighting over toys, except their toys were planets and their fights killed millions of people. Frank had tried to offer suggestions several times, but every time he spoke, one of the other species would interrupt him. The humans are too new to understand, they would say. Or, let the adults handle this. Katie had seen Frank's face get redder each time. Now the formal meetings were over for the day, and Katie needed fresh air. Well, not exactly fresh air since they were in space, but she needed to get away from the meeting rooms and the constant arguing. She made her way to the observation lounge, a large room with huge windows that looked out at the nebula surrounding the station. The purple and gold clouds swirled slowly, and stars twinkled in the distance like diamonds. It was peaceful here, quiet except for the soft hum of the station's machines. Katie stood close to the biggest window and pressed her hands against the cool glass. She thought about home, about Earth's blue skies and white clouds. She thought about her little apartment in New Geneva and her cat, Mr. Whiskers, who was probably sleeping on her couch right now. She wondered if she would ever see them again. Beautiful. Isn't it? A voice said behind her. Katie turned around. Commander Zix stood a few feet away, his black metal body reflecting the nebula's colors. Up close, he was even more frightening than in the meeting room. He was almost 8 feet tall, and his blade arms looked sharp enough to cut through steel. His compound eyes were like looking into a kaleidoscope, hundreds of tiny images of herself staring back. Yes, it is, Katie said, trying to keep her voice steady. She had dealt with scary people before, but never scary people who were giant. Bug aliens with weapons for hands. I often come here when the meetings become too much, Zix said. His translator made his clicking speech sound almost normal, but Katie could hear the real sounds underneath. Sometimes I wonder what our ancestors would think of us, fighting over the same things for hundreds of years. More aliens began to enter the lounge. Ambassador Veltar glided in, her crystal body chiming softly. Several Deepwater Alliance members swam through the water tubes that ran along the walls. A few Luminari appeared as floating balls of light. Within minutes, most of the delegates were in the room. Katie started to feel uncomfortable. She was the only human there, and all the aliens were much bigger than her. Frank was still in his room, probably working on his reports to send back to Earth. Tell me something, young human, Commander Zix said, moving closer to her. His voice was loud. Enough for everyone to hear. Your people talk much about peace and working together. But I am curious about something. Katie felt all the other aliens turn to look at her. The room became very quiet. What are you curious about? She asked. Your species is new to space, Zix said. You have only been traveling between stars for 50 of your years? Before that, you were stuck on one small planet. Tell me, in all that time on your little world, did you humans ever fight real wars? Katie felt her stomach tighten. She didn't like where this was going. Yes, she said simply. Humans have fought wars. Small wars, I imagine, said Ambassador Veltar, joining the conversation. Her voice sounded like ice breaking. Primitive conflicts over food and land. Nothing like galactic warfare. Other aliens began to gather around them. Katie could feel them closing in, not physically but mentally. They were all thinking the same thing. Here was a chance to put the naive humans in their place. I have studied your species' history, Zix continued. You fought with sticks and stones, then metal weapons, then simple explosives. Child's play compared to plasma cannons and antimatter bombs. But here is what I really want to know, Zix said, his blade arms extending slightly. Katie noticed several other aliens step back when he did that. Have you personally ever been in a real fight? Have you ever faced an enemy who wanted to kill you? The room became even quieter. Katie could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. More specifically, Zix said, his compound eyes focusing on her like gun sights. Have you ever killed another living being? Katie felt the question hit her like a punch to the stomach. She looked around the room at all the alien faces staring at her. They were waiting for her to admit that she was just a soft, innocent human who had never seen real violence. The humans speak of peace, Ambassador Veltar added, her crystal body flashing with what might have been amusement. But peace is easy to talk about when you have never been tested by war, when you have never held a weapon in your hands and been forced to choose between your life and someone else's. Elder Finn of the Deepwater Alliance spoke up from his water tube. My people have been fighting the Zephyrians for 200 years. I have personally led 17 battle fleets. I have watched friends die in the cold of space. That is what gives me the right to speak about war and peace. I have killed over 300 enemies in personal combat, Commander Zix said, his blade arms gleaming in the nebula's light. Each death taught me something about the nature of conflict. Violence is not something you can understand from books or stories. Katie looked around the room again. Every alien there was staring at her with the same expression, adults looking at a child who was about to learn a hard lesson about the real world. So tell us, little human, Ambassador Veltar said, have you ever killed? Do you even understand what we are really talking about when we discuss ending these wars? Katie opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. She thought about her orders from Earth. Don't make waves, don't problems, just observe and learn. Frank had told her to stay quiet and let him do the talking, but these aliens weren't talking to Frank, they were talking to her, and they were asking her a direct question that deserved an honest answer. Have you ever taken a life? Commander Zix pressed. Have you ever looked into another being's eyes and chosen to end their existence? The silence stretched on. Katie could feel the weight of their expectations. They wanted her to say no. They wanted her to admit that humans were soft and naive and didn't understand real violence. They wanted proof that Earth had nothing to contribute to their ancient conflicts. Katie thought about her service record, locked away and classified. Files back home. She thought about the outer colony wars and the things she had done during those dark years. She thought about the nightmares that still woke her up sometimes, and the faces she would never forget. She looked around the room one more time, meeting each alien's gaze. They were so sure they knew what her answer would be. Katie smiled. It wasn't a happy smile or a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made smart people take a step backward and check where the exits were. It was the smile of someone who had seen things that would break most people's minds and had not only survived, but learned to be very, very good at surviving. The room went completely silent, like a battlefield right before the shooting starts. Katie's smile grew wider, but her eyes stayed cold. The aliens around her shifted uncomfortably. Something had changed in the room, like the air before a thunderstorm. The young human woman who had been taking quiet notes for 3 days was gone. In her place stood someone else entirely. Have I ever killed? Katie repeated softly, her voice carrying clearly in the silent room. She turned away from the window and looked directly at Commander Zix. You ask that question like killing is some great achievement. Like taking a life makes you wise or important? She took a step forward. Several aliens took a step back. You want to know if I've killed, Commander? Katie's voice was still quiet, but there was something underneath it now, something that made the hair on the back of neck stand up. The better question is how many times? Ambassador Veltar's crystal body flickered with uncertain light. The human is trying to frighten us with empty boasts. Katie turned to look at the Zephyrian ambassador. Her smile never wavered. Am I? She began to walk slowly around the edge of the group, her hands clasped behind her back. It looked casual, but every alien in the room suddenly felt like prey being circled by a predator. I was 16 when I joined the Earth Defense Corps, Katie said, her voice conversational. 16 years old. Most of you probably think that's very young, and you're right. It is young to start killing people. Elder Finn made a bubbling sound. In his water tube, the human is lying. Earth has no real military. They are a peaceful species. Katie stopped walking and looked at him. Peaceful? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Elder Finn, where exactly do you think humans came from? Do you think we just appeared one day, fully formed and ready to explore the stars? She resumed her slow circle around the group. We evolved on a death world. Everything on Earth was trying to kill us. The weather, the animals, the plants, even the bacteria. We survived by becoming very, very good at killing things that wanted to kill us. Commander Zix's mandibles clicked nervously. Despite being twice Katie's size and covered in natural armor, something about her movements made him want to reach for weapons that weren't there. The outer colony wars started when I was 15, Katie continued. Pirates, corporate armies, rogue AI fleets, alien raiders who thought human colonies would be easy targets. They were wrong. She stopped in front of a group of tree-like aliens called the Verdani. They swayed away from her like she was giving off heat. My first kill was during a boarding action on a pirate ship near the Centauri system, Katie said. Her voice as casual as if she were discussing the weather. Close quarters combat. The pirate was trying to space a cargo hold full of children from a refugee transport. Families fleeing from a world that had been bombed flat. The room was so quiet that the soft hum of the life support system sounded loud. I used a knife, Katie said. Plasma rifles were too dangerous in a pressurized ship. Too much risk of punching holes in the hull, so it was blade work, up close and personal. She looked around the room, meeting each alien's gaze. It was messy, took almost 30 seconds for him to die. He kept trying to talk, kept asking me to stop. I didn't stop. Several aliens had backed up to the walls. The Luminari, who were made of pure energy, dimmed noticeably. You see, the thing about humans, Katie said, beginning to pace again, is that we don't fight wars the way you do. You fight like it's a game with rules. Acceptable losses, strategic retreats negotiated. Surrenders, you fight like gentlemen. Her smile became sharper. We fight like we're trying to break the universe. Ambassador Veltar's crystal body was flashing rapidly now, which Katie recognized as a sign of extreme agitation. This is barbaric talk. Civilized species do not glory in violence. Glory? Katie stopped pacing and stared at the Zephyrian. Who said anything about glory? I'm talking about necessity. About survival. About the difference between fighting to win points and fighting to make sure your enemy can never hurt anyone ever again. She turned to address the entire group. You've been fighting this war for 300 years. 3 centuries of careful, calculated conflict. You move fleets around like chess pieces. You capture territory and trade it back. You negotiate prisoner exchanges and truces and temporary ceasefires. Katie's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. We ended the outer colony wars in 12 years. Not by being more civilized, by being more thorough. Commander Zix found his voice. You speak of war like it is something humans enjoy. Enjoy? Katie tilted her head. Commander, you're asking the wrong questions. It's not about enjoying it. It's about being good at it. And humans are very, very good at war. She walked over to the large window overlooking the nebula. The purple and gold clouds swirled peacefully, but somehow they looked different now, more ominous. When the wars started, the corporate fleets had better ships than us. Better weapons, better armor, better training. They had been fighting in space for decades while we were still learning how to build decent spacecraft. Katie traced patterns on the window with her finger. When the wars ended, we had absorbed or eliminated every hostile force in a 400 light-year sphere around Earth. Not defeated, not negotiated with, eliminated. The word hung in the air like smoke. How many pirates do you think attack human shipping lanes now? Katie asked, not turning around. No one answered. None, Katie said. 0, not because we made it unprofitable for them, but because we made it genetically impossible. There are no more pirates in human space because there are no more pirates. She turned back to face the group. Her smile was gone now, replaced by something much more frightening. Complete calm. You asked if I've killed, Commander Zix. In 8 years of military service, I participated in 47 boarding actions, 12 ground assaults, and 6 fleet engagements. I've killed with energy weapons, projectile weapons, explosives, bladed weapons, chemical weapons, and on 3 occasions with my bare hands. The silence was complete. Even the life support systems seemed to have gone quiet. But here's the interesting part, Katie continued. I'm not a soldier anymore, I'm a diplomat. I'm here to talk about peace and cooperation and finding common ground, and compared to some of my colleagues back home, I'm considered quite gentle. Elder Finn's translator crackled as he tried to speak. This cannot be true. Earth's files say humans are a peaceful species. We are peaceful, Katie said. Now do you know why? She didn't wait for an answer. Because we got very good at making other people peaceful too, permanently peaceful. Commander Zix's blade arms were trembling slightly. You're talking about genocide. I'm talking about problem solving, Katie corrected. When someone keeps trying to kill your children, you don't negotiate with them. You don't try to understand their point of view. You don't look for common ground. You make them stop, forever. She looked around the room again. Every alien was staring at her with a mixture of fear and fascination. You've been fighting this war for 300 years because you keep fighting the same enemies over and over again. You defeat them, they retreat, they rebuild, they come back. It's like a game that never ends. Katie's voice became very soft. Humans don't play games when lives are at stake. When we fight a war, we fight it once. When we solve a problem, it stays solved. Ambassador Veltar's crystal body had stopped flashing entirely. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you really want to end this war, if you really want peace, then maybe you should stop thinking like chess players and start thinking like humans. Katie walked back to the center of the group. None of the aliens moved to stop her, but several backed away as she passed. The question isn't whether I've killed, she said, looking each of them in the eye. The question is whether you want to keep playing war for another 300 years, or whether you'd like some advice from a species that actually knows how to end them. The room stayed silent for a long time. Finally, Commander Zix spoke, his voice barely audible through his translator. What kind of advice? Katie looked at Commander Zix for a long moment. His question hung in the air like a challenge. What kind of advice could humans possibly give to species that had been fighting wars for thousands of years? The kind of advice you won't like, Katie said finally. Because it means admitting that everything you've been doing for 3 centuries has been wrong? She moved to the center of the room, where everyone could see her clearly. The nebula outside the windows cast purple and gold light across her face, making her look like something from a dream or a nightmare. You fight wars like you're trying to prove a point, Katie said. Like you're having an argument that got out of hand. You attack each other, you retreat, you regroup, you try again, round and round, year after year, generation after generation. Ambassador Veltar's crystal body flickered weakly. War is complex. There are political considerations, economic factors, cultural differences that must be... No, Katie interrupted, her voice cutting through the explanation like a blade. War is simple. Someone is trying to hurt you and yours. You make them stop. Everything else is just talking. Elder Finn bubbled nervously in his water tube. But surely there must be rules. Civilized conduct? Ways to minimize suffering? Katie turned to look at him. Elder Finn, how many of your people have died in the past 300 years of civilized warfare? The dolphin-like alien was quiet for a moment. Approximately 40 million. And how many Zephyrians? Katie asked, looking at Veltar. 37 million, Veltar replied reluctantly. Thrax? Commander Zix's mandibles clicked. 52 million. Katie nodded. So, in 300 years of civilized, rule-following warfare, you've killed over 150 million people. Just from 3 species, and the war is still going on. She let that sink in for a moment. The Outer Colony Wars killed 8 million humans in 12 years, Katie said. But then they ended, forever, no more colony raids. No more pirate attacks. No more corporate armies bombing civilian targets. The killing stopped. A new voice spoke up. Captain Reef of the metal-skinned Titanian stepped forward. How? How? Did humans end wars that completely? Katie smiled, but it wasn't pleasant. We made continuing the war more expensive than surrendering, much more expensive. She began to pace again, her movements fluid and controlled. Let me tell you about the Battle of New Harmony. A corporate fleet had been attacking human settlements, bombing hospitals and schools to break morale. They thought we would negotiate. The aliens listened despite themselves. There was something hypnotic about Katie's voice, like watching a predator stalk its prey. We tracked their fleet to a system called Kepler 442. They had set up a base on one of the moons, heavily defended, orbital stations, fighter squadrons, the works. A traditional assault would have cost thousands of lives and taken months. Katie stopped pacing and looked out at the nebula. We didn't make a traditional assault. We accelerated a small asteroid to 90% of light speed and aimed it at their moon. The room became very quiet. The impact was visible from 3 star systems away, Katie continued. The moon was completely destroyed. The corporate fleet, their base, their supply depots, their command structure, everything, gone in less than a second. Commander Zix's blade arms were shaking. That's a war crime. Destruction on that scale is effective, Katie finished. Word spread quickly. Other corporate fleets heard what happened. They realized that fighting humans wasn't like fighting other species. We weren't playing by the same rules. She turned back to face the group. Within 6 months, every corporate military force in human space had either surrendered or simply disbanded. They couldn't afford to keep fighting an enemy that would destroy entire worlds to win. Captain Reef's metal skin was changing colors, shifting from silver to dark bronze. But the civilians on that moon... There were no civilians, Katie said calmly. We had evacuated them first. Sent transports to every settlement, every mining station, every research facility. We gave them 2 weeks to leave. And if they had refused? Asked Elder Finn. Katie's expression didn't change. They didn't refuse. The silence stretched on. Finally, Ambassador Veltar spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Your species destroys entire worlds to win wars. When necessary, Katie agreed. But more importantly, we only have to do it once. After New Harmony, we never had to destroy another world. The lesson was learned. A small bird-like alien called Speaker Trill spoke up for the first time. This is madness. Surely there were other ways to... Were there? Katie interrupted. The corporate fleets had been raiding human space. For 3 years. They had killed over 2 million civilians. Diplomatic protests did nothing. Economic sanctions were ignored. Traditional military action just led to more raids. She looked directly at Speaker Trill. Tell me, what would your people have done? Keep sending strongly worded messages while your children were murdered. Speaker Trill had no answer. Katie resumed her pacing. The pirates were even worse. They didn't want territory or resources. They just wanted to kill and steal. There was no negotiating with them, no common ground to find. So what did you do? Commander Zix asked, though he seemed to already know he wouldn't like the answer. We hunted them, Katie said simply. Every pirate ship, every hidden base, every safe harbor. We tracked them across hundreds of light years. When we found them, we didn't try to capture them or reform them or understand their grievances. You killed them, Veltar stated. All of them, Katie confirmed. Every single pirate in human space. It took 4 years of continuous operations, but when we were done, piracy as a profession simply ceased to exist in our region of the galaxy. She stopped pacing and faced the group. You see, the difference between humans and everyone else is that you fight wars to prove you're right. We fight wars to make sure we never have to fight them again. Captain Reef's skin was now completely black. This is the most terrifying thing I've ever heard. Why? Katie asked. Because it works? Because it ends the killing instead of perpetuating it. Your species have been fighting for 3 centuries. How many more centuries are you planning? To fight? Elder Finn's voice was shaky. There must be another way. Some path to peace that doesn't require such ... brutality? Katie walked over to the window and looked out at the swirling nebula. Elder Finn, do you know what the most peaceful region of the galaxy is? No, he replied quietly. Human space, Katie said. 400 light years in every direction from Earth. No wars, no raids, no conflicts. Perfect peace. She turned back to the group. Do you know why it's so peaceful? No one answered. Because everyone who might start a war there is dead. The words hit the aliens like a physical blow. Several of them stepped back. This is monstrous, whispered Ambassador Veltar. This is effective, Katie corrected. Your children are dying in wars that your great-grandparents started. Your colonies are burning while you debate the finer points of interstellar law. Your species are bleeding themselves dry in conflicts that could end tomorrow if you had the will to end them. She moved back to the center of the room. You asked for advice? Here it is. Stop fighting wars you intend to survive. Start fighting wars you intend to end. Commander Zix found his voice. And if we refuse? If we choose to continue our civilized warfare? Katie shrugged. Then you'll keep fighting for another 300 years. And in 300 years, you'll still be sitting in rooms like this, debating the same issues, mourning the same losses, making the same mistakes. She looked around the room one final time. But at least you'll feel morally superior while your worlds burn. The silence that followed was complete. Even the life support systems seemed to have stopped humming, finally. Katie spoke again, her voice soft but carrying clearly in the quiet room. The choice is yours. You can keep playing at war, or you can learn how to end it. But don't pretend that your way is more humane when it leads to centuries of suffering. She walked toward the door. I'll be in the human quarters if you want, to discuss specifics. But remember, we're here to help you make peace, not to make your wars more comfortable. As she reached the door, she paused and looked back. Oh, and Commander Zix, that smile you asked about earlier. It's not the expression of someone who enjoys killing. It's the expression of someone who's very, very good at it. Katie left the room. Behind her, the aliens stood in stunned silence, finally beginning to understand what they had invited to their peace talks. The observation lounge stayed silent for a long time after Katie left. The aliens stood frozen like statues, each one processing what they had just heard. The purple and gold nebula outside continued to swirl peacefully, but somehow it looked different now. Less beautiful and more ominous, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Commander Zix was the first to move. His blade arms retracted slowly, and he walked to the window where Katie had been standing. His reflection stared back at him from the glass, but he was looking past it, into the swirling colors beyond. She was telling the truth, he said quietly, Ambassador. Veltar's crystal body flickered weakly. How can you be certain? Because I recognize the look in her eyes, Zix replied. I've killed over 300 enemies in personal combat. I know what that does to a person, what it takes from them and what it gives them in return. He turned back to face the group. The human girl has that look, but stronger, much stronger. Elder Finn swam nervously in his water tube. This cannot be right. The humans seemed so peaceful when they first made contact with us. They spoke of cooperation and friendship. They still do, said Captain Reef, his metal skin shifting from black to dark gray. That's what makes them so terrifying. They speak of peace while being the most efficient killers in the galaxy. Speaker Trill's feathers were ruffled with anxiety. We have made a terrible mistake. We invited them here thinking they were naive children who needed our guidance. Instead, we invited apex predators to a peace conference. Ambassador Veltar said, her voice like wind through ice. More aliens began to speak, their voices overlapping as panic spread through the group. What do we do now? Should we contact our home worlds? Are we safe here? Do they mean to eliminate us too? Commander Zix raised his blade arms for silence. The room quieted immediately. Despite their fear, they all still respected the Thrax. Warrior's authority. Panic will not help us, Zix said. We need to think clearly about what we have learned. He began to pace, his movements much less confident than before. The human spoke of ending wars permanently, of making peace through strength. This is not necessarily a threat to us. Not yet, muttered Elder Finn. Exactly, Zix continued. Not yet. But we have seen what happens to those who become their enemies. The question is, do we become their enemies, or do we become something else? Ambassador Veltar's crystal body began to flash again. You speak as if we have a choice. If they are as dangerous as she claims, then we are already at their mercy. Are we? Asked a new voice. Everyone turned to see Ambassador Frank Rodriguez, standing in the doorway. The human diplomat looked tired, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He had obviously been listening to at least part of their conversation. Ambassador Rodriguez, Elder Finn said, his voice shaky. We were just discussing your colleagues' revelations. Frank walked into the room, his hands held where everyone could see them, a gesture of peace that none of the aliens missed. Katie has a tendency to be direct, Frank said with a slight smile. I apologize if she frightened you. That wasn't her intention. Wasn't it? Ambassador Veltar asked coldly. Frank considered the question seriously. Actually, I think it was, but not in the way you might think. He moved to the center of the room, taking the same position Katie had occupied minutes before. But where Katie had seemed like a predator among prey, Frank seemed more like a teacher addressing nervous students. Let me ask you something, Frank said. Before Katie spoke, how many of you believed this war could actually end? The aliens looked at each other uncomfortably. None of them answered. Be honest, Frank pressed. How many of you came here expecting to negotiate another temporary ceasefire? Another prisoner exchange? Another division of disputed territory that would just lead to more fighting in 10 years? Commander Zix's mandibles clicked reluctantly. All of us. Exactly, Frank said. You've been fighting for so long that you've forgotten what victory? Looks like you've accepted eternal war as normal. Speaker Trill's feathers smoothed slightly. But the human girl spoke of genocide, of destroying entire worlds. She spoke of ending conflicts permanently, Frank corrected. There's a difference, though I admit it can be a subtle one. He looked around the room, meeting each alien's gaze. Katie didn't tell you those stories to threaten you. She told them to show you that wars can actually end. That peace is possible, even after centuries of fighting. Elder Finn bubbled softly in his water tube. At what cost? That depends on you, Frank replied. The cost is always highest for those who refuse to stop fighting. Ambassador Veltar's body flashed with cold light. Are you threatening us, Ambassador Rodriguez? Frank shook his head. I'm offering you a choice. The same choice humanity faced during the Outer Colony Wars. He walked to the window and looked out at the nebula. We could have kept fighting the traditional way. Gradual escalation, acceptable. Losses, strategic retreats. The war might have lasted 50 years instead of 12. But, Commander Zix prompted, but 50 years of war would have killed 50 million people instead of 8 million, Frank said. Generations of children would have grown up knowing nothing but conflict. Entire worlds would have been reduced to battlefields. He turned back to face them. We chose to end it quickly and brutally rather than slowly and politely. 8 million died so that billions could live in peace. Captain Reef's skin shifted to a lighter shade of gray. This is the choice you offer us? Not exactly, Frank said. See, you have an advantage we didn't have during our wars. Which is? Frank smiled, and for the first time since entering the room, he looked genuinely happy. You have us. The aliens stared at him in confusion. You don't have to learn how to end wars the hard way, Frank explained. You don't have to develop the weapons and tactics and strategies yourselves. You don't have to make the difficult choices or live with the consequences. He spread his hands wide. We've already done all of that. We've already paid the price for learning how to make peace. Now we can teach you. Elder Finn's voice was very quiet. What exactly are you proposing? Simple, Frank said. Let us end your war for you. The silence that followed was deafening. You would fight our battles? Commander Zix asked. We would solve your problem, Frank corrected. There's a difference. We wouldn't take sides in your conflicts. We would eliminate the ability to have conflicts. Ambassador Veltar's crystal body had stopped flashing entirely. How? Frank's expression became serious. The same way we ended piracy in human space. We would identify every military force, every weapons manufacturer, every shipyard that contributes to the ongoing warfare. Then we would systematically neutralize them. Neutralize, Speaker Trill repeated. You mean destroy. I mean make them unable to continue fighting, Frank said. Sometimes that means destruction. Sometimes it means conversion to peaceful purposes. Sometimes it just means making the cost of aggression too high to bear. He looked around the room. Again, the choice is yours. You can continue managing your wars for another 300 years. Or you can let us end them in 3 years. Commander Zix stepped forward. And afterwards? When the fighting stops, what happens to our independence? Our sovereignty? Frank smiled again. The same thing that happened to the former pirates and corporate armies in human space. You become part of the peaceful galaxy. You trade, explore, build, create. You do anything you want except make war, and if we refuse? Asked Ambassador. Veltar, then you refuse, Frank said with a shrug. We'll go home. You'll continue your eternal war. And in 50 years, when you've lost another 20 million people, maybe you'll reconsider. He walked toward the door, pausing at the threshold. But I hope you don't wait that long. Katie was right about one thing. Your children deserve better than inheriting their parents' wars. As Frank left the room, the aliens remained silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Outside the window, the nebula continued its ancient dance, beautiful and eternal and utterly indifferent to the small concerns of the mortals who watched it. Finally, Commander Zix spoke. What do we do? Ambassador Veltar's crystal body began to glow softly. We make a choice. The most important choice our species have ever made. Elder Finn swam to the front of his tube. All in favor of hearing the human proposal? One by one. Slowly and reluctantly, every alien in the room raised their hand, tentacle, or appendage. Then we call them back, Commander Zix said, and we listen to what they have to say. Outside the window, the nebula swirled on, unchanged. But inside the station, everything had changed. The age of eternal war was about to end, one way or another, and in the human quarters, Katie Morrison sat quietly, cleaning her sidearm and humming an old Earth song about peace.